She laughed when I got down on one knee. My fiancée turned away during the engagement, but what I said after that ruined her life forever. I had driven 9 hours through a snowstorm to surprise my wife, Abigail, on her birthday. I had a cake, her favorite one from the bakery she loved, and a dinner reservation that took me 3 weeks to get. It was supposed to be a beautiful surprise, but nothing could prepare me for what I heard when I walked in. Her laughter echoed through the house as I placed the cake on the counter. I had expected joy, excitement, maybe a kiss. Instead, I overheard a conversation that shattered everything. Abigail, my wife of 7 years, was sitting in the kitchen with her sister Mia. I had noticed her behavior changing the past 6 months. More time with friends, more comments about our house being a starter home, more about how my career wasn't leveling up. I thought it was just a phase, a bit of a midlife crisis. Maybe. I kept telling myself everything was fine. I didn't expect this. As I stood outside the kitchen door, cake box in hand, I overheard Abigail speaking mid-sentence about me. He texted earlier, she said, saying he was stuck at work, probably still there. In this weather, they have sent everyone home. Mia laughed, and Abigail continued. Can you imagine him insisting on coming to dinner with us tonight? Telling the same 3 stories he always tells? Then he'd get that sad puppy look when I want to go out tomorrow without him. The words hit me like a punch. I froze in the doorway, clutching the cake box, listening to them mock me, my presence, our marriage. Abigail laughed at the thought of me not being there, and that's when she said the words I'll never forget. God, I hope he crashes. I could use the insurance. The air left my lungs. I didn't even know how to respond. I thought they had to know I was there. Maybe I had made a sound. Maybe I was caught. But Mia responded, or at least a few months of silence. They both laughed, and that was it. I didn't confront them. I didn't storm in, yell, or cry. I simply placed the cake on the counter and walked out into the snow, leaving behind everything I thought I knew. Abigail called my name, but I didn't stop. I didn't even look back. I drove away without a plan, without direction, just feeling numb. The next few days were a blur. Abigail kept trying to contact me. 17 missed calls, 38 text messages, pleading, angry, confused. I read none of them. I went to my friend Theodore's place, and that was when it hit me. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was everything. The emotional weight, the realization that this was probably just the first time I had heard her say something like this. And as I sat in Theo's spare bedroom, a strange calm overtook me. I knew what I had to do, but I had no idea how it would all unfold. The next few days felt like living in a fog. I didn't want to confront Abigail yet, not when I could barely grasp what had happened. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched. 17 missed calls, 38 text messages, each one more frantic, desperate, or angry than the last. It was like listening to a distant echo of someone who no longer existed. I didn't read a single one of them. I turned off my phone and buried myself in Theodore's spare bedroom, the only place I could find some peace. I knew this wasn't just about the words Abigail said. It was about everything she had been hiding, every little moment that had slipped away unnoticed, the cracks in our relationship that I had been too blind to see. I thought about the future we had planned, the vacations, the house, the simple life, but none of that mattered now. What did matter was that I had been living a lie, and the truth, ugly and sharp, was finally out. Theo had been a rock through all of this. He didn't ask questions, just kept the fridge stocked with beer and let me vent when I needed to. He offered to help me with the divorce papers, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. I wasn't sure if that's what I wanted, but I did know that everything had to change. I couldn't go back to the way things were, not after hearing her laugh, not after hearing those words about insurance money. It wasn't until the 3rd day that I allowed myself to read the texts. I sat at Theo's kitchen table, scrolling through Abigail's attempts to reach me. Her tone changed as the days passed, from pleading to angry to defensive. But not once did she say she was sorry. Not once did she acknowledge how completely fucked up what she said was. It was just the same old manipulative garbage. It was just a joke. You're overreacting. I can't believe you're doing this to me. I'm sorry I hurt you, but I need you to forgive me. And that was when it clicked. I wasn't the one who needed to forgive. She was, and I wasn't ready to give her that power. The thing was, I didn't know where to go from here. Part of me wanted revenge. A small part of me wanted to make her feel just a fraction of the pain I was in, to look her in the eye and see her face twist in guilt. But the other part of me, the one that still loved her, damn it, I loved her even after everything, just wanted closure. A clean break. To walk away and never look back. Theo had his opinions on what I should do. You need to talk to her, he'd said. Get some closure. You need to know where her head's at. But every time I thought about that conversation, I felt my stomach twist. What would I even say? What would she even say? How could I ever trust her again? I stayed at Theo's for the next couple of days, not speaking to Abigail, not speaking to anyone. It was the first time I had ever been truly alone in years, and it felt both liberating and terrifying. But then something happened that changed everything. The phone call came at 8 a.m. on the 5th day. I had just finished a cup of coffee and was flipping through job listings, trying to distract myself from the inevitable. I didn't want to think about Abigail or our marriage or how everything had fallen apart. And then my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Noah? This is Detective Summers. We need to talk about your wife. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest, and the coffee in my hand suddenly felt cold. I swallowed, my throat dry. Detective Summers? I repeated, almost disbelieving. What's this about? It's regarding your wife, the voice on the other end said. The tone was calm, professional, but there was an underlying urgency that made my stomach knot. We need to meet. There's been an incident. I was barely able to keep it together, but I forced out a response. What kind of incident? It's better if we talk in person. Are you available? I felt a surge of panic. What did this mean? What kind of trouble was Abigail in? My mind raced, but I couldn't find any rational reason for a detective to be calling about her. The past few days had already been a blur of hurt, betrayal, and self-doubt. And now this, what had she done? I agreed to meet. My head was spinning, and for the first time in days, I could feel the weight of my thoughts pulling me down. I didn't even know how to process what had just happened. I was supposed to be moving on, try to figure out what to do with the wreckage of my life. Now, I was being pulled back into her world, into a place I didn't want to be. I met Detective Summers an hour later, in a small coffee shop a few blocks from Theo's place. The detective was a man in his mid-40s, wearing a plain suit and a stern expression. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He slid a folder across the table to me. We've been investigating your wife, he said, watching me closely. There are some things you need to know. I opened the folder. The first thing I saw was Abigail's name and a list of charges. Fraud, theft, conspiracy. My breath caught in my throat. The words blurred as I scanned through the details. What is this? I whispered. Detective Summers didn't answer right away. He simply looked at me, his eyes dark with something I couldn't read. Finally, he spoke. Your wife is involved in a scheme. A scam involving a number of other individuals. It's been going on for months. I sat there in silence. My mind was reeling. I couldn't process the words. Abigail, my wife, the woman I had trusted, the one I had driven through a snowstorm for, was involved in something like this? Summers went on to explain that Abigail had been using her position at a local charity to siphon funds. She'd been embezzling money, falsifying records, and even forging signatures. The scale of it all was staggering. The detective said there were other people involved, people I didn't know, and it was all connected to the same web of lies I had just begun to untangle. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced in 1,000 different directions. How could I not have seen this? How could I have been so blind? And yet, there was a part of me that felt a sick kind of relief. I wasn't the one who had screwed up. I wasn't the one who had broken the trust. Abigail had been hiding so much more than I ever realized. Summers' voice cut through my thoughts. You need to know that your name has come up in connection to this, he said, his eyes narrowing. We have reason to believe you might have been unknowingly involved. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Your wife had access to a number of bank accounts, both joint and personal. Some of the transactions she made bear your name. I felt the room spinning. No, I said, my voice shaking. I had no idea. The detective leaned in closer, his voice low. We'll need your cooperation, Noah. We need to know everything about her, everything about your relationship. I nodded numbly. I'll do whatever it takes. But I don't know anything. Summers paused for a moment before continuing. There's one more thing. We found something strange, an insurance policy, a large one, with you as the beneficiary. The timing of it all, it raises some questions. I felt like the floor had dropped out from beneath me. What? I whispered, barely able to make sense of the words. You're going to want to see this, Summers said, sliding a piece of paper toward me. It was an insurance policy. My name was listed as a beneficiary, and the policy was worth $500,000. My mind was reeling. What had Abigail done? Was she planning something? Had she? I couldn't finish the thought. The detective's words hung in the air like a noose. We need to figure out how deep this goes, Noah. The words still hung in the air, thick and suffocating. $500,000? My stomach churned. I glanced at the piece of paper before me. The insurance policy with my name on it. I couldn't make sense of it. Abigail had always been the cautious type. She never made moves without thinking them through. And yet, here I was, being dragged into a mess I had no part in. Is this why you said you hoped I crashed? I muttered under my breath. So you could cash in on me? The idea felt like it was eating me alive, but the detective didn't respond. Instead, he stared at me, his expression unreadable. I felt like I was being watched, not just by him, but by some unseen force lurking in the background, making sure I didn't miss a step in this twisted game. I wanted to ask more questions, to confront the reality of what Abigail was involved in, but the words stuck in my throat. How had I been so blind? How had I ignored the signs? I had spent the last few days wrestling with my emotions, questioning everything, but this was something else entirely, a level I hadn't even imagined. What happens now? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My hands were shaking, and I didn't know if it was from anger or fear or both. Now, we figure out how far this goes, Summers replied, and we figure out how you fit into all of this. I could feel my heart racing. My name was connected to this mess, but I had no idea how or why. And the worst part? Abigail's silence. She hadn't even tried to explain herself. There had been no apology, no admission of guilt, just her actions, her lies, and now her betrayal. How long has this been going on? I asked. The question felt like it had been bubbling up inside me, begging for an answer. At least 6 months, Summers said, pushing the folder closer to me. But we're still piecing together the timeline. What we do know is that she's been using her position to funnel money. You were listed as a beneficiary on a life insurance policy, but there are other strange transfers, cash withdrawals, large purchases, things that don't add up. Your name pops up on records we're still investigating. I felt the blood drain from my face. My mouth went dry. There were records I didn't know about, things I hadn't even heard of. The feeling of being trapped, of being stuck in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from, pressed down on me. I hadn't signed up for any of this. I had been the one in the dark. Abigail, I said, my voice cracking. I stopped myself. I didn't know what to say anymore. We'll need to talk to her, Summers said. She's already under investigation. But right now, we need you to come in for questioning. I know it's a lot, but you need to understand. Wait, I interrupted, my brain suddenly sparking. You said you're investigating her. But why are you bringing me into this? Summers hesitated before answering. There are some things we haven't fully connected yet. Noah, we need to know everything about Abigail. And everything about you. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. What the hell are you implying? I demanded. The detective didn't flinch. He simply said, you need to help us understand how deep this goes. My mind was reeling. Everything about my life felt like it was crumbling. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was something far darker, something that was going to rip my entire world apart. And the worst part? I was stuck in the middle of it, with nowhere to run. The detective gave me a card with a phone number. "Call us when you're ready to talk," he said, standing up to leave. "We'll be in touch." I didn't move as he walked away. I stood frozen, the card heavy in my hand, a piece of paper that held my future in its grip. And as the door clicked shut behind him, I was left alone to face the consequences of my wife's secrets. The days that followed felt like drowning in a sea of disbelief. Detective Summers' words haunted me. Insurance policies, fraudulent transactions, and my name buried somewhere in the mess Abigail had created. I didn't know what to think, and I didn't know what to feel. But there was one thing I did know. Everything about my life had changed, and I didn't even see it coming. I ignored Abigail's messages. I couldn't bring myself to face her. Each time my phone buzzed, I felt not form in my stomach. The last thing I wanted was to hear her explanations, her manipulations. I wasn't ready. I needed time. On the 5th day, something in me shifted. The compulsion to go back to the house, to see for myself, became undeniable. I hadn't been there since I'd walked out. Abigail's laughter still echoed in my head. The cruel, thoughtless words she had spoken, mocking me, our life, everything we had worked for. It gnawed at me, but there was still a thread of hope inside me that refused to let go. Maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought. Maybe there was some mistake. When I arrived at the house, I stood there for a moment, taking it all in. The front door, the yard, the familiar driveway. I couldn't bring myself to knock at first. What would I say to her? What could we say after everything that had happened? But I had to know the truth. I had to see her face, hear her side, or at least try to make sense of it. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked harder. After a long moment, the door creaked open. There she was, standing in the frame, her eyes wide with a mix of surprise and something else I couldn't quite place. "Noah?" she asked, her voice shaky. "What are you doing here?" I didn't answer right away. The weight of everything was pressing on me, and I had no idea what to say. How could I say the things I needed to say? How could I make sense of everything she had done? "We need to talk," I said, forcing the words out. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. She stepped aside, letting me in. The house felt foreign now. The air was thick with something that felt like defeat. The warmth was gone. We sat in the living room. She sat across from me, fiddling with her hands, never once looking me in the eye. I couldn't understand why. Shouldn't she be relieved to see me? But there was nothing in her gaze. No apology, no remorse. Just an emptiness that mirrored my own. "Abigail," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What is going on? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you come clean?" She flinched, as if my words were a physical blow. For a long time, she didn't speak. The silence between us grew heavier, suffocating. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet and strained. "I didn't want you to know," she said, eyes darting away. "I didn't want to hurt you." I couldn't help the bitter laugh that bubbled in my chest. "Hurt me? You've already done that. You've already destroyed everything." Abigail lowered her gaze to her hands, her voice barely audible. "I never wanted to hurt you, Noah, but I was scared. I thought if I kept it hidden, it would all go away." I shook my head in disbelief. "This isn't something that just goes away. Abigail, this is bigger than us. You've been lying to me for months, maybe longer. And now I'm stuck in the middle of this mess." She finally looked at me, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and something else. Desperation, regret. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she whispered. "I didn't plan any of it." "Then how did we get here?" I asked, my voice rising. "How did you end up—" I paused, my voice tight with the weight of the question. "Involved in something like this?" Abigail's face twisted, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't know who to trust anymore. The money, the pressure, it all piled up. I thought I could handle it. But I got in too deep, Noah. "Too deep?" I repeated, disbelief shaking my words. "You didn't just get in too deep, Abigail. You dragged me down with you." The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. Everything I thought I knew, everything I believed in, had been a lie. And I was stuck try and piece it together. But then Abigail said something that made my heart freeze in my chest. "There's more," she whispered, barely audible. "There's something I haven't told you. Something that could change everything.